I'm going to share the screen. Today we are going to begin into the different disability categories. So today we're going to look at at first to start an overview of high incidence disabilities, what that is, and then we will go into specifically speech and language impairments and start looking at those pieces. So let me get this up and running. All right. Okay, so we're going to take a look at different disability categories that are across the idea and what that means. These are the different disabilities that meet the criteria to be served in special education. So remember that it's part A of that formula. You have to have a condition of a disability and educational need for services, and then you are eligible for services. So as we look at this piece here, this is the different disability categories on a pie chart, and the ones that we have categorized as high incidence disabilities are learning disabilities, speech and language impairment, intellectual disabilities. Specifically, we're going to look at 50 and up to 70 IQ for those. Emotional disturbance, and then other health impairment, and we include autism. It's a growing one, so we kind of pull it into the high incidence disabilities. See, since we're seeing many more of that, and so we'll look at autism later in this semester specifically. Okay, so this is going to be from this point on in your career. This website is an excellent online tool for you, and we're going to go there right now. It's the legal framework. It is it's produced by Region 18 out of Midland, Odessa, and it is an online source where it has all the information the legal precedents in Texas for the special education process. What you will find at this website is several things. This picture of Texas are the different educational service center areas. We're in Region 9 up here, and you see it covers these areas here. I was a consultant in Region 11, which is the Fort Worth area. And so these are some of the things that you'll find there. You'll notice here there is a notice of procedural safeguards. We're going to look at that probably on Thursday and take a look at the different procedural safeguards. Remember, one of the pillars of IDEA is the procedural processes for IDEA. And so we're going to look at this procedural safeguards notice, and it's a long document, but it's an interesting document. Also, you see up here on these tabs, there's a whole bunch of different things. We can click on the Getting Started tab, and let's watch a little video about the legal framework. And it's kind of an interesting thing, so just to get you knowledgeable of this. I don't know why that's not working. Okay, well, we're not going to do that, so that's frustrating. I can't understand. Maybe the video we're going to watch later will work. We'll see. Okay, so let's go back to the legal framework. Don't we just love technology? Let's see if it works on this page. Okay, sorry guys. All right, so let's go back to the home and the board, and we'll look at each of the elements that's here. So what you will find here is various documents that you can download. IEP processes, the IEP model, it's here. Timeline, I've given that to you. A timeline decision tree, transfer of rights when a student turns 18. Texas is a age of majority state, so when a student turns 18, their rights transfer to the student, and they make the decisions for themselves at 18, just like you guys. That's why you guys, you're over 18. Here at college, you have to, if your parents want to see your grades or see stuff, remember you have to sign a FERPA statement giving them rights to see that. That's the same thing at 18, a child or student can sign over a FERPA and let their parents be involved fully that way. But I've had kids that they just wanted their parents out of their life, and so at 18 they just took over. So it's been interesting, especially kids with emotional behavior disorders. It's interesting there. Also, there's a glossary of all the different terms in special ed, some various resources for federal resources, parent resources, state resources, etc. When there's been updates, and then we can look at the different frameworks. These are where all the laws are housed. And so we're going to walk through the different frameworks for the different disability categories here. You'll see evaluation. Well, there's all the different things for evaluation. And then there's the 13 different disability categories that we will walk through the rest of the semester. So this is the legal framework for the child-centered special education process. It's an excellent resource. You guys will use that a lot in your career. So that's the framework. So now, remember when we were talking that when we got to tier 3 and a student is not responding appropriately to tier 3, then we have to refer them for a full individual evaluation. And the child must be assessed in all areas related to the suspected disability. So whenever we think that, okay, a student comes and they're not learning to read according to what their peers are, we might say, is there a health problem for that student? Maybe they can't hear as well, maybe those things. So we need to rule those things out. So if appropriate, we need to rule out health, vision, hearing, social, emotional, etc., and etc., to identify if a student is having a specific problem. If it's a health area that can be rectified quickly, like for example, a student needs glasses and they can't see the board, then that's not a learning disability, that's a seeing thing. And so the doctor, they get glasses and they're perfectly fine. Also, if they have chronic ear infections, that could be a doctor thing and not an education issue. And so they would take care of those pieces there too. So we need to make sure we rule that out because we don't want to over-identify students with disabilities or they have don't have a disability when they're suspected of it. So remember we talked about the process for services to special education. It's this formula, A plus B equals C. A, you must identify a disability category or condition. B is there must be an identified educational need for services. And then C are special education services. So you have to have all three, all A and B to be able to seek C under IDEA. And that's where the majority of our kids with disabilities are served, is under IDEA. So remember that. That's a very important process. A plus B equals C. And not A minus B doesn't equal C, or A, no A, and you have B does not equal C. So that's important to remember those pieces. All right, so these are the different disability conditions in Texas. So let's just walk through them so we have an awareness of them. The first one is speech language impairment, and this acronym is SLI. So that's, you'll see a lot of people talk about SLI, speech language impairment. Specific learning disability is SLD or LD. Other health impairment is OHI, and that's things like, we'll talk about those later in this module because they're high incidence disability. ADHD is captured under OHI. Intellectual disability, AKA a mental retardation, way back when, they changed that in the 90s to intellectual disability. Emotional disturbance is ED. Autism is AU. Orthopedic impairment is OI, and it's often mistaken for OHI. You can see how that can happen. Orthopedic impairments are the physical impairments. People with cerebral palsy, people with missing limbs, etc. Those are the folks that are captured under orthopedic impairments. Impairing your ability to move around and access the education process. Then we have visual impairments, VI, auditory impairments, AI. Auditory impairments also includes deafness. Visual impairments also includes blindness. Then you have deaf blindness, which is a very unique disability category. Traumatic brain injury, TBI, is an acquired disability. Multiple disabilities is very unique also. And then the final one is non-categorical early childhood. are, this is Texas's version of developmental disability. So these are the conditions of a disability. Those are all the A's. So a student must be identified with these specific, one or more of these specific disability conditions in order to be able to be served in special education. All right. Then we must have a documented educational need, and I think we've talked about educational need is broader than academics. We tend to think it's only, can they read, can they write, can they do mathematics? But if you look at this list, short list, it could be academics, it could be social, emotional, behavioral, physical, safety, etc., etc., etc. So it's much broader than just the academics. Now there is an academic piece and how that has an effect on their academic piece, but mostly we have to think broader than just academics. That's the B. The C then are services, specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of the student. Remember, the unique needs of the student. So that's, again, that's just a little overview. I just wanted to reiterate that with you guys. Just go over that real quick again. So, and we looked at the timeline. I've given you a copy of this if you ever want to kind of walk through that. The blue things here are highlights. They are hyperlinks. So in the document, you can click on those and it'll take you to those pieces. But this is the timeline. It's quite convoluted. But remember, the thing that's important for you guys is that for a general ed classroom, when a parent signs the consent for an assessment, you have 45 school days to complete the full individual evaluation. And then once the student, that is completed, then you have 30 calendar days to complete the IEP meeting. And then you must review it annually. And then every 3 years, you have to go through that process again of evaluation, etc. So this is the skeleton of the timeline for you guys that are in general ed. This is the minimum stuff you need to know. Okay? So if you walk away from this class with this information, you'll be good. You'll learn the rest as you go through. Okay. So now then, we're going to move to speech and language impairments. Why do you think that it's speech and language disorders or speech and language impairments? Is there a difference between speech and language? What would you think speech is? Do you guys ever watch Looney Tunes? Do anybody in Looney Tunes have speech problems? Just about all of them, don't they, you know? Except for Bugs Bunny, he's got narcissistic personality disorder. That's he's emotional disorder. But everybody else, Elmer Fudd, doesn't he have he lisps, and he has an R sound problem, that wascally wabbit. And Willie makes me angry, right? Everybody in Looney Tunes has a disorder of some kind. Tasmanian Devil is ADHD, you know. Tweety Bird has a short man syndrome, but also he has a speech impairment. Sylvester and Daffy Duck both lisp. So you can look at those. It's interesting that it's sad that we make fun of people with disabilities and Looney Tunes, but it's there. And then if you guys ever watched The Princess Bride, the marriage thing, marriage is what brings us together today. You know that one? That again, that's a speech impairment, so it's kind of an interesting thing. Speech is what comes out of your mouth. It is how we make the sounds out of our mouth. Language is how we understand the language and use the language. So speech and language are separate. Most kids that are served in speech and language impairments are speech disorders, and they're not learning the sounds and using the sounds correctly as developmentally correctly. So that's the differences between the two. So the definitions, let's talk about communication. And can speech disorder, articulation, cause problems with how you understand a message? Can it? We have a lot of problems today. Have you figured out that we're much more visually oriented when we talk, and when we don't have the masks on? When we have the masks on, it's harder to really understand. Not only is our language muffled, what comes out of our mouth, but we are more visually oriented to reading facial expressions and lips and etc. So communication is the interaction between two parties about communicating a message. And so if we take a message coming from a sender unit, so you have a sender, and you have over here a receiver. What are some things that can inhibit the message to getting to the receiver with the same intent that the sender was sending? So you have a message that's coming from the sender unit. And something inhibits it, and then it gets all gargled. So you have a message that ends up being a massage, right? Because something garbled. What could inhibit that from happening? What could inhibit the message from receiving the same impact? What are things from the sender? You guys are too young now to, any of you guys ever have a little dial radio, AM, FM radio? You never had one of those, right? That's sad. I remember so many nights trying to listen to a ball game or trying to get the radio station, and having to adjust that dial on that thing just enough that to make it connect clearer. So something is getting in the way. It could be what's being sent. Maybe it's the speech pattern. Maybe do you know anybody that speaks real fast? Is a fast talker? Is it hard to understand them sometimes? Okay, so it could be their speech pattern. Are people that speak really slow, y'all, you know? That's another one. So it could be speech patterns. People that have really high voices, it's harder to hear than for guys especially. And for girls, it's especially hard to hear guys that speak really low. And so it could be a speech pattern, it could be the voice, could be a language, not a language disorder here, but a language difference, you know, cultural difference. It could be cultural. So there could be cultural. It could be gender. Here's one. Do you know how guys give directions? It's go north on such and such road until you get to such and such road, then you go east, and then you go north again at the next road, okay? Is that confusing for you girls? For girls, it's more visually landmarks. Go down the street till you reach such and such business, turn right, and then when you get to such and such business, turn left, right? That's a gender thing, and guys just do north, south, east, and west. Now, I'm from California, and so how we gave directions were, you go up the coast, that's going north, you go down the coast, it's going south, you go to the coast, that's going west, you go inland, that's east. That's how we gave directions. But does that work in the middle of West Texas? No. We're North Texas, right? It doesn't work in North Texas either. So I had to change the way I gave directions out of here and understood directions. So it could be cultural. It could be a language difference. It could be gender. It could be if you like the person or not. That can have an impact on your understanding. I think that we're seeing that in our political thing right now. Some people are saying the exact same thing, but they don't like the other person, so they're going to say they disagree. It just doesn't make any sense. I shake my head and walk away and go, oh, well, this is stupid. So it could be a sender message. It could be a receiver message. The sender could be articulating inappropriately. The receiver could not be set up to the same channel. My wife tells me all the time is that I'm a doctor, so I talk up here sometimes and have to learn to talk for more layman's terms, not use jargon. And when you get to schools, you use jargon. So if the sender's using jargon, like IEP and BIP and all these other things, sometimes the receiver doesn't understand that. So you gotta use appropriate words that people understand. Also, if the receiver is messed up, like they don't have good hearing, like for example, I have assistive devices, my hearing aids. And if I don't wear them, I won't understand a word you say. So it could be that the receiver's messed up. So we have to look at both pieces of this to communicate a message. And the whole intent of speech and language impairment is to receive the message from the teacher and learn it, and to share that you know what you're learning. That's the big deal. And so we look at communication as being a huge piece of education. And if students are struggling with that, then that's a problem. And see, the functions of communication are to tell a story, narrate, explain, request, and express. And if in any of those pieces the receiver doesn't receive them well, then the message is garbled and not met with the same intention. Does that make sense? Just a real basic understanding of communication. But this is human communication interaction is what the big deal of speech is. So let's think of this. Language is a formalized code that a group of people use to communicate to one another. It is an oral code. So all the sounds we have, we make all the different sounds. And in English, there are around about 44 different sounds, which is huge. And we'll watch a video on Thursday about sounds from Dr. Souza, the guy from your book. But there are 44 different sounds that are made, and it's really a problem. Still don't know why that sound's not coming through the thing. Okay, there's 5 dimensions of language. There's the phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Phonology and morphology are speech pieces. You have phonics. That's the itty-bitty pieces of the different sounds. So that's phonics. And then you have phonology, is how it associates two different codes. So these are the sounds. And like, for example, the letter C. How many different ways can you say C? The C has the K sound like a K, has the S sound like the S, has the, then if you put it with another letter, a Ch sound with it, when you add stuff to it. Here's the, also, let's think of this. How many sounds are in that word? Knit. How many different sounds? There are it, it, 3, right? There are 3 sounds. Now, how many sounds are in mix? There's it. So there's the M sound, the I sound, the sound, and the sound. Mix. 4 sounds. So see that it's kind of, it can get confusing. That's all the phonology thing. So phonology is the rules determining how sounds are sequenced to make sense. So you can have letters all over the place, and like this, it's at. That's 3 sounds, has 1 meaning. It's a furry animal that says meow, right? That's cat. When you put it together, that's the phonology. The morphology is the meaning of the sounds. You have free morphemes, and you have bound morphemes. Free morphemes are like the letter A. By itself, it just has meaning, does it not? When I say a thing, what does that mean? One thing, correct? So it has meaning. It means one thing. But some letters you have to put together to have meaning. And so that's the morphology. And those are the speech things. Then you get down into syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Syntax is the rules for the language's grammar. Semantics are rules for the meaning of words. And pragmatics are the common communication uses. Syntax, for example, Yoda is has a syntactical disorder, right? A Jedi become you will. The language is out of order. But that happens from people that are from different languages because they speak language like German. I took German in high school and I went and lived in Germany for a year. It's, you don't say I'm hot because when you say that, it's like saying I'm hot. You know, you say es ist heiß zu mir. It is hot to me. But if you spoke like that in English, wouldn't that sound kind of odd? Right. So syntactical things can come from either a misunderstanding of the language, from language difference, or it's a brain thing that they're not understanding the language. And semantics is using words correctly. And I don't know how many times I've listened to supposed professionals talk and then misuse words. Like what's the one that always drives me nuts? You don't put ear in front of everything to make it like irresponsible or irrespective or those kind of things. There's one word there, and I can't think of it now. It's just maybe it's I'm breathing in too much carbon monoxide. But that's the semantics piece. Pragmatics is using the practical pieces of language. So again, how you communicate with your peers. So speech also is the oral production of language, and speech sounds, if there's problems physically, then it can cause problems for making proper speech sounds. For example, kids with cleft palates. And the reason, there are two specific reasons why you fix cleft palates, because so many things when we speak, our tongue goes to the hard palate in our mouth to make those sounds correctly. But also, they can't, if their cleft palate is there, they can't feed themselves either. They can't suckle. So that's a problem. So we have the ability to breathe. Well, you have to have that. The production of sound by the muscles around your mouth and how they work. And sometimes that causes us to make the sounds incorrectly. Resonation. Do we talk through the top of our head? Do we talk nasally? Do we talk from our diaphragm? How do we talk? And articulation is the formation of the sounds. Those are those pieces. So those are all speech. And now the interesting thing about speech and language, we're going to see if this video works. Hopefully it will. If not, this will be posted. You guys can go on. It's just a ASHA, American Speech Hearing Association, difference between speech and language. Speech usually does not have an academic piece to it, whereas language does. A speech disorder is just making the sounds incorrectly and doesn't affect them academically. It might affect them socially or emotionally, but not affect them academically. So let's see if we can get this one to work. Technology.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Christina and this is Speech Therapy Education. Today we're going to talk about the difference between speech and language. I do want to inform you that a majority of the information provided in this video is either adapted or quoted directly from the American Speech Language Hearing Association website. Resource links are provided in the comments below. The difference between speech and language is one of the most fundamental topics in our field, and it's one that's easily confused. Speech and language are different, even though they're intertwined. A lot of times when diagnosing language issues, the first question from families is, wait, you mean speech, right? Not exactly. So today, I'm here to talk about the difference between speech and language. Let's start with speech. Speech is the production of sounds. Think about this in terms of motor movements, like moving your hands or moving your head. Speech is broken up into 3 categories: articulation, voice, and fluency. Articulation is the way we produce sounds by moving the mouth, lips, and tongue. The way we say by building up air in our mouth and putting our lips together, or the way we say by raising the back of our tongue and releasing the air. Voice is associated with our vocal folds. When air is inhaled and exhaled from the lungs, we have the opportunity to make phonation with our vocal folds. If somebody abuses their voice by talking too loud or purposely using a breathy voice, they could develop a voice disorder. Fluency is the smoothness or the rhythm to our speech. Fluency is most often associated with stuttering. People who stutter might repeat sounds or use too many fillers such as or Overall, speech does not have anything to do with our comprehension. So what is language? Language is the comprehension of a spoken, written, or other symbol-based system. You might often hear this broken into two parts, receptive language and expressive language. Receptive language is our reading and listening ability. Expressive language is our spoken and written ability. Language is composed of 5 domains: phonology, semantics, morphology, syntax, and pragmatics. Phonology is the ability to make out phonemes when listening and using them appropriately when talking. A phoneme is a unit of sound. When written, phonemes look something like this. The M with the slashes is a way to write the sound M. The I with the slashes is a way to write the sound E. The K with the slashes is a way to write the sound K. The English language has at least 44 phonemes. For the purposes of this video, we won't dive too much into phonology, but know that this is an important component of speech. Semantics is simple. This is our vocabulary. This is our knowledge of what words mean and how to put them together when writing and talking. Morphology. Think of morphology as the way to make new words with existing root words. Morphology is the grammatical component of language. For example, I can change the prefix or the suffix of a word to change the meaning. Think of the word happy. I can add un in front of happy to be unhappy, or I could add est to the end of happy to be happiest. Syntax is how we put words together. This is our knowledge of the sentence structure of language. We can make simple sentences, or we can build into more complex sentence structures. I'm going to provide some sentence examples. Think about how each sentence I make becomes more complex. The dog plays. The dog plays with his toys. The dog plays with his toys in the backyard. The dog plays with his little toys in the backyard. Last, we have pragmatics. Pragmatics is the social component of language. This is our ability to know when to use eye contact, how close we should stand next to somebody, when to take conversational turns, or how to stay on topic during conversation. Pragmatics is often a major deficit area in individuals with autism spectrum disorder. So to review, speech is the production of sounds, and language is the comprehension of a spoken, written, or other symbol-based system. I hope you all liked this video. If there's a topic you would like me to cover, please leave a comment in the comments below. Again, the resources used for the information in this video are provided in the description. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with future content. Thank you guys so much. Have an amazing day.
Hopefully she explained it a little bit better than I did, so there you go. So do you understand the difference between speech and language? Now many of you, if you're EC6 or EC3 or whatever, the early ages, you'll be dealing with kids that have speech problems, so you need to kind of know, is that just developmentally, are they not ready to say those sounds yet, or is it truly a speech disorder that a speech therapist needs to get in there? So make sure you're aware of the different, how language and speech is developed. So if we look at this, from birth to 6 months, kids are communicating by smiling, crying, and babbling. And when you have kids, you'll know that there's different cries mean different things, like I'm a hungry cry, or I need a diaper change cry. There's a difference, and you can tell the difference. They all sound the same in Walmart when you hear other parents with their kids and they're crying. From 7 months to 1 year, they start to babble. Now, this is an interesting time. All children make the exact same sounds from 7 years to 1 year. How they get differentiated is by the culture and how you reinforce. For example, a baby's going around and making the dust sound, going da 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 da, and all of a sudden he adds an A sound to it, go da 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 da. So that sounds like da da, right? So here's mom. She hears the baby say da 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 da. So you said da da. How great that is! Reinforcing and saying, okay, let's take a picture of the video of you doing that. Send it to mom, dad. Let's send it to grandma. Said his first word, da 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 da. So the baby's doing that. And then a little bit later, you kind of back off on the reinforcement, and so there's one small reinforcement going mama, 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 mama. Same thing. When you said mama, videoing, send it to grandma, send it to dad, you know. So that's the reinforcement. We differentiate the sounds. So that happens all around the world, is that kids are making the sounds, all the exact same sounds in languages all around the world. And just how they differentiate to make the language happen. Make sense? So then from 7 months to 1 year, the babbling. From 1 to 1.6, they learn to say several words. Then from 1.5 to 2 years, it's a huge spurt in the amount of words that they learn. And then 2 to 3 talks in sentences, short sentences. And then 3 on, they're just increasing their vocabulary. So that's important to understand. So if kids at 3 are not talking in sentences, that's a problem. And we see that with kids on the autism spectrum. We see that with kids with frontal lobe dysfunction pieces, kids with intellectual disability, those kind of things. So causes of this are here. It could be a result of for speech and for language. It could be some causes. And she talked about these things. This is speech, include voice, articulation, and fluency, whereas language includes form, phonology, morphology, syntax, pragmatics, content, all those things. This is the different sounds at the different ages. And so we look at this to see if they're making the appropriate sounds at the ages. You see the sh, and z, and jet, and yet, and all these are higher order, and they're at later dates that they should have them mastered. So this is for you guys in the earlier grades. This is a good chart to kind of keep in mind when you're hearing their languages, speech. And this is just another table of different ages of development. So it's another chart that you can use. So as mentioned, the characteristics that speech impairments usually do not include academic problems, whereas language does, because it's understanding and using your language appropriately. This is depending on the severity of a speech problem. That's usually going to be rectified by the time they're 9 or 10, unless there's a brain issue causing it to be longer. Like many kids with Down syndrome have physical issues with their mouth. They don't articulate very well, and so that will be a lifelong issue. Language is much more longer lasting and more problematic. This, in ages 3 to 5, is the largest category of a disability, but because language is incorporated into it. When a student becomes learning to read and they start struggling with reading, the language problem turns into a learning disability. And so it flips at ages 6 on. It becomes a learning disability is the largest category, and speech becomes the second one. So they kind of change places. But learning disability by far is the largest category in all disability categories. And this is the ASHA, American Speech Hearing Association definition, IDEA's definition of a communication disorder or a speech impairment. They're very similar. Their video kind of talked about this, and we're not going to go in great detail. And so speech sound errors are distortions like the Wesley-Wabbit, substitutions like saying ax instead of ask. Omissions are my wife and I like British television shows for some weird reason. So, and I hear so many omissions of sounds, like they'll say "whoa" instead of "what." They say "whoa," and they'll leave off the T. They're omitting the T. And additions, it might be adding another sound to the word. And so those are some speech sounds. So that's speech sound errors. Articulation is not being able to physically do it, so they have to work on that. And phonological disorders is the ability they can't find the sound in their brain. If there's anything else. So identification and assessment. This is where when you do a full individual evaluation, you have to use the speech and language pathologist. Often they'll come in and listen to this child talk and then say, yeah, they need a referral or not. And so that's important to understand those things. And they'll go through the same process to collect all the information appropriately for that. Okay. Treating speech sound errors, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I'm going to get to something. What can you do to help in the classroom? Because most of the kids are served in general education classrooms. So that's important. They have pull-out speech like 30 minutes to an hour once a week. So what you can do, and there's a whole bunch of these. If there's an articulation piece, is just repeat what this word is supposed to sound like. Like for example, if they, I had a occupational therapist that would, instead of saying specific, she would say Pacific. So what I would do with her is say, so the specific thing, I would emphasize specific so she might hear it. Eventually, over time, she starts saying specific instead of Pacific. So that's a putting things in wrong order in the sounds. So if the child says, I want a snake for a snake, say, oh, you want the snake. So you just repeat it. And that's the best thing you could do for articulation disorders, sounds. And there's a whole bunch more for here. If it's grammar, then you kind of work with them and say, it's like the child says, I go to the store, you'd say, oh, you went to the store. Teaching them the proper usage of those things. So it's, those are important pieces. I did that twice. Use visual cues with the students to help them build vocabulary. Word games. graphic organizers, those kind of things. There's great information in these pieces. I will also have included in your files where I got this information from, so you can utilize that as a document rather than have to go through the PowerPoint. Social and pragmatic skills, you can work, that's where play is very important. And kids learn how to negotiate and share information, develop friendships in play. We've kind of limited that since we don't do a lot of recess anymore. And we found that if you give more recess, kids' academics go way up. So that's an interesting thing. It's the whole pragmatic social interaction piece. Social communication. Board games, very important for younger ages. If it's following directions, you might need to use a visual chart to help them follow directions. But be specific. Don't give more than 2 directions at any one time. Have steps for them to complete. Some more. Visual strategies work great with this. Processing information. Again, get past the language barrier and go to pictures. Picture graphic organizers, that's the stuff you want to use. Use multiple modalities, not just speaking, but reading, writing, and listening, hands-on, interactive stuff. Those are some things that you could do. So this is all in your PowerPoint for you guys. Expressive is about using the vocabulary correctly, so you want to encourage them to use, that's where games are important. More stuttering, and getting them to slow down and to have their speech catch up to their thoughts. That's the big thing. Stuttering is hard. Work with your speech therapist on that one. And things for pre-K through 1, a lot of visuals. 2nd through 5th, manipulatives and visuals and graphic organizers. Those are the best things you can do. Okay, any questions about speech and language? We'll move to understand how language and reading are associated on Thursday. We'll talk about that and get through that. Any questions? Or you guys kind of got this? This is speech and language impairment. 3 to 5, largest category, but learning disability is largest overall. That's important. Okay, nothing else. See you guys virtually on Thursday. Bye. See you guys face to face on Thursday.